I really liked her performance.
I like her performance and everything. I think she's so good. They're all so fucking good.
Well, it was funny as well because every season I've done quite hardcore scenes with Lena, and we always would do these kind of scenes where she would be, where it seemed to us that she should be really super emotional, and we would do emotional takes, and then David and Dan would always either they were there and they'd say bring it down, or they would cut it out. And so we never got to do, like when Tommen dies, we had a really emotional take. They used a different kind of take in the final edit. This was the one time where they made no restrictions on her in terms of being emotional, and it was kind of great because there's some heavy stuff in this episode, and they didn't stop her, and I think that was a really interesting choice on their part.
But she was great when she got imprisoned and she drank the water off the floor, didn't she? That was.
But remember, they wouldn't let her show her emotion. Oops, sorry, Peter. In the same way as they did in this one. No.
Okay.
I don't want to die.
So this was an interesting scene for me because usually Dave and Dan never want us to go off script. They don't like the actor saying anything that isn't written. And we had reached a point where we were doing this scene, and it was quite a difficult scene to find the right tone for. I eventually went to Dave and Dan and I was like, can you just let these guys improvise because they need to get there on camera? And they said, yep, absolutely fine.
Oh, look at that, though.
They just let us do our thing, and I was really proud of them. Yeah.
They so got there, didn't they? Yeah, look at them.
And how do you work with the actors? Do the actors give you advice as well, or comment if something rings false to them, or?
I mean, this year famously we did the big table read with all of them, so everyone got to see this read the script for the first time out loud.
Yep.
And then, some stuff like they would point out, like, I actually think they should be this way, or like this doesn't quite ring right for me. We would adjust, listen to it, and adjust. I'm like, okay, good point.
Me and Natalie had a big conversation. I mean, and I spoke quite a lot to David and Dan about how...
He's the oneer. The one shot you were talking about.
But what an incredible action scene.
I do want to say quickly that I don't like the fact that Grey Worm shouts at Missandei there. I know it's life or death, but I kind of hate that he shouts at her.
So you had this big discussion with them, you see?
Yeah, we did. We talked about the different levels of it. Yeah.
The close-up of you when you go to leave and then decide to come back.
Oh, yeah. Oh, because this whole scene when we were doing my close-up, we were being so, specific about, where the eyes went and, the lean in and then lean out as if she wanted to. Yeah, we had every single, minuscule movement timed out.
Of course she is. And she's wondering what trap you're laying for her.
Shall we?
Again, one of those scenes I read and thought, wow, this is long. But you got these actors, these faces, and this material. And when you guys make it look so beautiful.
And most of all, these performances, these faces, the fireworks of these actors, two of our finest actors in the cast playing off each other.
Point 1. Benioff and Weiss were very strict about actors sticking to the script that they wrote, not just refusing to let them ad-lib new lines, that is a strategy of filmmaking, but micromanaging their nonverbal emotional responses. Acting, all parts of it. They were just playing their faces like hand puppets. And this extends to the point that things on the scale of Lena Headey insisting, I think Cersei should react more upset that Tommen, her last living child, has died, that complaint was overruled. They want you to read what they wrote the way they want you to read it. And despite all this insistence, don't deviate from our source script, the hypocrisy that Benioff and Weiss themselves made massive deviations from George R.R. Martin's source material, the hypocrisy is lost on them.
I love the way she sneaks past him here as well.
And Lena's like...
Oh, right.
We did various versions, actually. We did a version where she stopped and he lets her go. We did a version where she looks behind her and she's so frightened that she starts running forward and she ends up nearly running into him. We did a version where she just walked past and then left it to Dan and David to kind of decide what they wanted to do at the end. We did that a lot.
You always give them loads of choices.
One of the ideas is throughout is you got to give them choices. Because you cut the version that you want it to be, and then everybody's different.
No, I didn't like the comments that said that was me.
I think there was about 70.
Come back again. Yes. Oh, young people. Cruel young people.
This one of my favourite shots coming up is that silhouette behind Nikolai. I love that shot.
Oh, what, when she sees Nikolai for the first time and there's a silhouette leaning against the post, yeah. And there was a really nice little shot of
look at her, though,
him dropping his sword and it hitting the floor that I...
Yeah, of course. But
they were both awesome in this. I really, really like this. Originally, this scene had a whole bunch of dialogue in it, and we ended up... we shot it all.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's the thing.
But you know what? The thing that happens is usually in the cut, I'll deliver the cut, the director's cut, that I usually take out things that feel superfluous, but try and keep in as much as possible, because ultimately there's kind of dialogues down to David and Dan, and then gradually over the years I've been a bit braver in making suggestions of cuts, etc. But what will always tend to happen is just the second to last edit that you see before it's locked, a whole load of dialogue will disappear, like in this one.
You're hurt.
Point 2. Benioff and Weiss wanted to focus on showing off the faces, the actors' faces, and this also extended to micromanaging the cinematography, overruling directors. They felt the best way to show off the faces with no dialogue was either A, static shots like a painting. He rants in the commentary, it's so beautiful, there's no motion in it. Static shots like a painting. Or B, all of these gratuitous, continuous one-er shots, many of which we never fully saw because the directors eventually revolted. Sapochnik said so much of Battle of the Bastards was supposed to be a one-er shot. Arya was supposed to have a 7.5-minute long one-er shot when she escapes King's Landing. Other parts, like the destruction of the Iron Fleet, most of the Long Night episode was just a string of one-er shots. And you think, well, that isn't a static still shot, it's an outgrowth of that. The point is the camera is still pointed at the actor's face. The example I'd use is if something is hanging off the rear view mirror in your car, and you're looking at it, like, a pair of dice or something, the dice don't look like they're moving relative to your eyes or a camera you're holding, but the world moves around them. So when we have Arya running through the streets, her face is still pretty much front and center in the middle of the camera frame as the world moves around her. Or the finale itself, we want the camera focused on Peter Dinklage's face. He's moving around, but it's the background is moving relative to his face. That it's never off of it. So you see how the one-er shots are an extension of static shots like a painting. Sapochnik talks about this more in his IndieWire interview, the post-finale interview, where he really let loose on a lot of this, and he explained that these two novelists that don't have any training in cinematography or experience in it, they'd never worked in television before, are telling me, an experienced director, what the camera motion is supposed to be like. They were lecturing me that no, camera edits within a scene are distracting. That's the phrase they used, distracting. Hard camera cuts. because the human eye can't do that. You get the impression they wanted to maintain the illusion that you are there in the room with the celebrity actor, pandering to celebrity actor culture. That if you're staring at someone head-on in a long, static one-take, or it's a one-er shot where the camera moves around like a human eyeball would if you were in the same room as them, it makes you feel sucked in. But even something like a camera hard cutting from looking at the left side of Maisie Williams' face to now from the right side, you couldn't do that in real life, shift from two sides of her face. So they hate that and go, no, it's distracting, or it's taking focus away from the faces to the story or camera work, which in their minds are just a supplement or a means to an end. So on top of that, because they were going, no, we want it filmed this way, they would put up the pretense of listening to input from the cast or their professional directors. But it was just this silly game they went through. This is not the first time we've heard of this. Jack Bender was talking about it in Season 6. Sapochnik's talked about it a lot, particularly here in episode 8.5, that they would film alternate takes that were presented the way a normal show would be filmed. Like, Lena would insist, can I film another take doing it the way I wanted to do it, where Cersei is actually very emotional that Tommen has died. Or Sapochnik would put in some artful cinematography editing, you framing the camera, editing the shot in such a way that Cersei's looking down at Tommen or up, the various tricks of cinematography that are a visual art. So they'd send in 2 or 3 candidates. Hey, here's the one the way you asked for it, and here's my suggestion for how we should do it. And from everything Sapochnik has said, who's one of their major guys, they would consistently go with their version. That it was, I think this is just how the cast and crew maintained their sanity. Embracing the lie that, oh no, they always listen to us. We present them with options. Yeah, how many times have they picked your version? Well, so exceedingly rarely, Sapochnik has to point it out in this video that her death scene is the one time they really let her do that. That otherwise it was very strictly, do what I tell you. This was not collaboration. And in a normal show, you'd have this collaboration before they were filming. It's to feel better, the directors and the actors together would film alternate takes, which they weren't told to film it like that, and go, well, maybe you just weren't listening when this was on paper. This is what the actual great performance by Lena, hearing that Tommen has died, this is what it would look like in live action. We already did it. They'd still overrule them. And at what point did these people realize, or were they even willing to admit to themselves, that Benioff and Weiss are bad bosses who do not collaborate with other people? They don't even have a writer's room. They've defended that we didn't need a full writer's room. Normal shows have 10 to 12 writers. We knew we were best. Cogman and Hill pretty much do what Benioff tells them to do anyway. Same with Weiss. That so much of this was just these two guys, really just Benioff, micromanaging the actors and the camera directions with no oversight. And you hear all of this confirmed by what Sapochnik is saying in the 8.5 commentary.
One of the things I adored about directing Game of Thrones is that so many of the scenes were still. There weren't a lot of movement. You remember when we rehearsed this scene? Yeah. At one point I had James go up when he was talking about Heartsbane, the sword, and sit back down, and I think it was, we had 2 versions, and Dan and David voted for the one where he just stayed there. Yeah. And I think that was absolutely the right choice, and because there's such power, and the only camera moves in this are the push-ins on Hannah and John, and the push-in on James when he realizes where she came from, which I thought was great.
This is one of my favorite scenes of the whole season. I mean, just the performances here, no movement. It's Lena on her knees and Jonathan sitting, and God forgive me. But just so compelling watching both these faces.
It was a gift, you boys.
Now, a point that may confuse you is point 3, so I'll explain this. You'd think that if their goal was show off the actors emoting, that we're trying to show off the actors emoting with no dialogue, because they're not real screenwriters, they don't have screenwriting degrees, and their plan is ride the coattails of celebrity actors by showing them off. Okay, that's logical. You're trying to show off actors and latch on to their fame, and you know any dialogue you can make will not equal the source material. But you think, okay, they're trying to get the actors emoting all the time, that they push the actors to be in outright hysterics, over-the-top melodrama, chewing the scenery. Well, yes and no. That somewhere along the line they got the common sense that people could tell we were showing off the actors if they were chewing the scenery all the time. They chose the more subtle option of, and it's slightly different, their goal, and which they genuinely seem to believe, is their concept of emoting isn't so much hysterics as actors staring very intently at the camera. That this is drama. I'm making a serious brooding face. Maisie Williams, Kit Harington, Lena Headey. And it's just the soap opera face is what they used to call it when they were cutting to commercial. It doesn't mean anything. It's cut and paste. I made a video about a year ago on the lack of cinematography in the show. I'm going to link this in the description below. Please watch it. On Game of Thrones and the Kuleshov effect. That the Kuleshov effect is a major montage theory of editing that, and this has been tested by psychologists, that when you look at a neutral expression by an actor intercut with drama scenes, you think they're making a dramatic face. But if you're intercutting it with comedy scenes, you think they're making a funny face. And your brain is wired to read meaning into that through montage. What I call the Kuleshov face is they have this generic staring intently face, which, like Littlefinger staring intently when he's talking to Sansa and Winterfell lords, and this is incoherent. And the actor himself will say, I don't know why my character is doing this. But it leaves it more open to interpretation. If Cersei was yelling, or if she was crying, it's pretty clear this is just lazy writing. If you have them make a neutral face that's intent but neutral, the audience will read in whatever meaning they want, because it's vague. How many people were making really out there theories about what Cersei's motivations are? Is she angry? Is she sad? Is she regretful? Showing her crying would make that obvious. It actually helps hide the mistakes in the writing, that it's empty inside, by making neutral staring intently face. Even so, Benioff isn't outright lying. He genuinely believes that's what a drama face looks like. Just copy-paste, she's staring intently. Even when direct objections were coming from the actors, that Lena Headey said, I shouldn't be just staring intently in this scene. Tommen has died. I should be crying. They'd overrule her. And you hear this in the clips, that they are gushing in awe of Lena Headey's face, staring into the camera, citing, there's no movement in it. It's not just that the camera isn't moving relative to Lena Headey, the whole analogy of your rear view mirror in your front windshield, something hanging from it stays constant. If we hung like a Jon Snow action figure in front of a camera and ran around with it, the action figure wouldn't move relative to the frame, even though the background moves around. It's not just that the frame isn't moving relative to the actor, but that the actor himself or herself isn't moving either. The camera isn't moving, the actor isn't moving. It's like a series of beautiful paintings. It's like when actors make photo shoots for magazines. They're striking poses. The things you see on billboards that are marketable. Look at the faces right here. Lena Headey making staring very intently face. This is her striking a Cersei pose. The actress herself doesn't want to do this. She wants to be emoting. But if you sub in this rare example of her making a crying face from her death scene, it doesn't look as iconic. Or attractive. It's not just for women, it's for men as well. If you had Jon Snow crying his eyes out over the tragedy of his birth parents, he wouldn't look like the Kit Harington that is a brand name that we see on billboards. So you hear this consistently in the commentary clips. I'm trying to keep this short. And originally I was just going to run this with none of my audio, but it was too hard to make you read all of this. We've seen this very consistently over the run of the show, not just season 8. They want to show off the faces. And that stock phrase, more than one person has said, we think it's part of a pep talk that David Benioff gives different people. That's why we heard both Alan Taylor and Brian Cogman saying it. Well, we're doing it to show off these performances and these faces. Like, that's what he says as justification for why are we sending Sansa to Winterfell in season 5? We're doing it to show off this amazing performance. This face. Even though it's not a performance, we get Lena Headey with Tommen's death. This isn't a performance. Her performance was when she was really emotional. It's striking poses, and people get sucked in because you're not even using camera editing or cinematography of, skipping between two different alternating camera shots. It's striking a pose like a magazine or a billboard with a static shot. And they'll use continuous one-er shots to try to cheat and still get that static focus on the actor's face front and center. It's like being there physically, the human eye, because we can't break the 180-degree rule or jump around in space like that with editing. It is frightening watching an episode of Game of Thrones from season 5 onwards where they started micromanaging things, compared to an episode of Breaking Bad or The Sopranos or other Emmy-level TV, and just the visual poverty and of the camera work and how much the actors are using their whole body and actually experiencing emotions. The freakouts that Walter White has on Breaking Bad with Bryan Cranston, he isn't striking poses for a billboard with his face. He's sobbing in certain scenes in frustration or grimacing. The shows they're chasing after don't even make the same mistakes Benioff and Weiss do. They have a fundamental lack of knowledge of how cinema works. And I like to think that this was a contributing factor in how they got kicked off Star Wars. Not just that whatever crazy story decisions, but that they spent like a full year, 2018, with working with Star Wars, that they gradually realized these guys don't know how camera work functions, or the actors are having a miserable time, that everyone was micromanaged by these guys with no oversight. And this is the consistent story we're getting. And when people go, no, you have to judge Benioff and Weiss's artistic merit, I judge that they were not collaborating with their cast or their cinematographers or even with the basic logistical production end of things. When people told them it is physically impossible to get that done so quickly, they said, find a way. Shut up and do it the way I told you. Now I'm going to go back to Los Angeles while you suffer here filming at night for 55 days. And I am stunned that more news sites weren't watching this stuff. All of this stuff was in the season 5 Blu-rays. They're just repeating things they've been saying 4 years in a row. They were always like this. This was always there, particularly at least in season 5. That's when we realized this is a nightmare of a Blu-ray commentary. Everyone is complaining. Benioff and Weiss just tell them, I don't want to hear it. Find a way. Don't worry about it. Read it the way I want you to. Two men with no qualifications in acting or cinematography.
It's so cool to watch this, because for me it's like when I did season 4 and I did those 2 episodes, at the end of that I thought they're never going to ask me back to come and do another season. And then when they did ask me back, that was like a real surprise, and then that's how Mig and I met, so that was...
Well, good team.
And then to watch this season, which is, at the end, which is, that's very nice.
I didn't even get to choose you, Fabs. Oh, you were
I know
forced on me.
You couldn't say no.
Yeah, you were forced on me. I said, oh my God, I'm working with a grumpy German, and it turned out that you're actually Fabi Magna.
Oh, you knew that already before you met me?
No. Mate, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. You were only ever grumpy on 2 different days on Battle of the Bastards and most of season 8. But apart from that, the best thing about Fabs, everybody should know, is that on the first season where I was basically either sinking or swimming, every single weekend, Fabian used to text me or call me to check to see if I was okay. No one else had ever done that before in my life, and it made me just go, I love this guy. Because not only was he good, but he gave a shit.
Yeah.